I speak to you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You know, fear of change is one of the greatest killers of our joy. You and I worry about a lot of things. That meeting with a boss, that upcoming wedding, we're afraid of moving to a new job in a new city. We worry about launching our children and doing that well. How on earth am I going to fill out the income tax return, we ask, now that Charlie is gone? What happens if I don't get a job when I graduate? How am I going to get through this major surgery? If that guy in the office attacks me again, I'm going to freak out. Vacation somewhere else? Well, what if we don't like the beaches and the restaurants? No, we're going to go back to Cape Cod, where we always go every summer, just to be safe. You know, churches are extremely conservative institutions, usually resist any form of change on principle. Thank God that's not true of Knox Stratford. You know, one church always served apple pie with ice cream. Someone suggested they have apple pie with cheddar cheese for 1 year. And what happened? The church split over that issue. You know, there's a lot of ways that don't work in handling change. Some of us procrastinate. I had a friend who had a lump in her breast. Instead of going to her doctor immediately, she put it off. Months went by. When she started to experience pain, she finally went to see her doctor. It was malignant. Her doctor said to her, "Why didn't you come to see me when you first discovered it?" She answered, "Well, I was afraid it might be cancer, and I couldn't deal with that." She was dead within a year. Why do we procrastinate? Fear. It's a whole lot easier to put things off than to face our fears, isn't it? Are you in an abusive relationship in your marriage? We say, well, maybe he will change. Besides, what would I do if I had to go it alone? Do we have an alcohol addiction or an addiction to cigarettes? Oh, we say, I need it to cope just now. You see, things are pretty stressful at work, and I just don't want to add to my stress right now. I'll target the 1st of January. And January comes. Well, you see, things are still stressful. If we're afraid of the future, afraid of change, procrastination is going to give us the luxury of kidding ourselves. But I guarantee you this, if we procrastinate as a lifestyle, as some people I know do, we'll never get to joy. Strategy number 2 that people use to cope with change anxiety is negative criticism. You see, the critic can sit back and watch the others who are actually doing things and then give them a performance rating. It's a great deal easier to talk about someone else's performance than to be a performer oneself. Or to be the person who is actually doing it requires effort, risk, and change. As Theodore Roosevelt said, you know, it's not the critic who counts, not the person who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. You know, when you and I criticize other people, we're getting ourselves off the hook. We're not doing anything. Take the case of Bill, who was on the Cancer Society. They'd always had a bazaar to raise funds for the Cancer Society, and one year Mary was elected as the new president. And she suggested that they have a draw on a new car to raise money. Well, Bill was against it, said so openly, said he didn't like the direction that the Cancer Society was going. For one thing, it was too big a risk. How would they ever pay for the car? People might get upset at being asked for money all the time, and a bazaar was the best way to go as far as he was concerned. Mary, however, was a self-confident person. She pressed on with the support of her committee. Bill did everything to undermine her efforts. He spoke about her in public negatively to anyone who would listen to him. You see, Bill was losing power, and he knew it, and he didn't like it. Mary reached her goal, paid for the car, and raised $30,000 for the cancer research. It was a huge success. Bill, however, continued to oppose Mary's leadership. Bill was asked, if you feel so strongly, Bill, why don't you join the fundraising committee? Bill refused. He was not that sort of person. At a bazaar, people actually got something for their money. The other was gambling, he said. When Mary raised 4 times as much money, did Bill apologize? Not in your life. Why not? Because Bill actually felt powerful when he criticized Mary. And of course, if Mary were to fail, he could always say, I warned you about this, but you didn't listen to me. So 2 benefits for Bill. He was able to put off threatening change with the added benefit of feeling important. If procrastination and criticism of others who are trying to make a difference are failure strategies, what actually does work? Number 1, imaging works. Jesus said, whatsoever things you ask for in prayer, believe you have them already, and they shall be yours. How does that work? Well, what you want is in the future. We need to take that future and bring it into the present moment. Believe that we already have what we want. And the promise is that when we do this, things will start to happen to make it happen. In other words, hold the vision before you of a job well done. Hold the success as if it was already a reality in your mind. This is what Jesus taught us. Now you and I, this is not so strange to us at all, because you and I do this all the time, negatively. This is something at which we are all experts. You and I think negatively about the future. We picture ourselves as failing at some task, at our marriage, at our job. In 2024, it's like getting COVID again. We play the worst scenarios through our minds. We think about the worst thing that could happen. How do you beat that kind of fear? Well, if we're going to follow Jesus' advice, we do the exact opposite. We can play through our minds, scene by scene, as if we were already successful. This can be used after a cancer diagnosis, or getting well after a health setback. There's a research that shows that positive imaging can awake the immune system to fight cancer. Thinking negative thoughts is not the least bit of help in strengthening the immune system, which we all need in a crisis. Why are we adding stress to that equation of recovery? Being peaceful and strongly positive can turn the tide in many situations that you and I face. There's a guy in town, no longer with us, designed a number of places. One of them's on the corner where the bus terminal is. It's got some stuff on the top of the building. That's one of his. Another one on the other side of the river, another one of his. Top of Bill Reeford's store, another one of his. Jenny Trout Center, another one of his. Peter was his name. Peter and I were friends. He came into the office one day and said, "David, you're a man of the cloth. What can you do for me?" I said, "What's the problem?" He says, "I've got cancer, lung cancer." I said, "What's the prognosis?" He says, "Not good. I'm going to die." "What can you do for me? You're a man of the cloth." So I said, "Well, first of all, I'm going to pray for you." So I prayed for him. And then I taught him this verse: "Whatsoever things you ask for in prayer, I believe you have them already." I said, if I were you, I would get a hold of Louise Hay's books on cancer. I'd read them through. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there on cancer. Use positive imaging. He left my office like a madman. Tore up the street, got in his car, went to Toronto, and got all the books I suggested. And he read them voraciously. This guy wanted to live. 3 months later, he went in, and the doctor said, that cancer in your lung has turned into a hard ball. You're okay. For 10 more years, Peter lived well in this community. Year 11. He decided to go back to his previous stress-filled lifestyle. Within 1 year, he was gone. Do you want to open your own business? We are to see ourselves doing the business well, according to Christ, as if it was already an accomplished fact. Are you and I afraid of public speaking? Well, we could see ourselves as successfully entertaining a crowd of 10,000 people who are all paying rapt attention. This stuff works. I know from personal experience. Imaging is a very strong technique to overcome the fears that are sabotaging us and killing our spirits. Secondly, the second strategy to cope with anxiety is the Jewish concept of chutzpah. This means having the courage to take bold risks. There was a minister I knew who had chutzpah. He was concerned about the Sunday School Christian Education's coordinator's position in the church. And for 3 months he'd been approaching people to do this, to consider becoming the Sunday School superintendent. Everybody had refused. The notice appeared in the bulletin every week. He began to lose sleep over it. He wrongly felt that he was somehow to blame. He became more and more anxious. And one day, he made a decision. The Sunday service began. He got through to the children's story, and he finished telling it. And then he stopped and said, I have asked everyone in the church to consider being Sunday school superintendent. I've advertised in the bulletin week after week with no result. Nobody wants to do this, and I feel that this position is vital in the church, so I am going to do it. With that, he left in the middle of the church service for Sunday school with the kids, leaving the congregation with open mouths. Next week, there was a Sunday school superintendent. What that minister did took chutzpah. If you've got a problem today, do something that's going to take a little bit of courage. If it's a big problem, break it down into baby steps. Then take little risks. As you do, your confidence and self-esteem will grow until moving mountains will become part of your repertoire. Why does chutzpah work? The procrastinator and the critic have got something in common. They don't take risks. If you've been here so far listening to me saying David is crazy, everything I've said so far, please don't forget this. Action cures fear. Here's how that works. As soon as we actually do something about our worry, we get to stop worrying about it because what was in the future has moved into the present. Did you ever learn to ride a bicycle? First, it was hard to get your balance, wasn't it? But once you did that, all sorts of possibilities began to open up. Your personal freedom increased. Your self-confidence went up. Your anxiety level diminished, and you were happier than before you tried it. The third thing we need to say about change anxiety is the state of the modern world. You know, it's very bleak at the moment. The Israeli-Palestinian war, the Russian war against Ukraine, the rise of far right-wing politics rather than democracy. Let's face it, the future is full of uncertainty on every hand. Trying to fight things that are beyond us is not where your hope lies. Turning the clock back is not possible. We are where we are. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. Charles Dickens' book, Great Expectations. Miss Havisham does not handle change well. Because she was jilted on her wedding day, she froze in her tracks. So she stopped her reality. The wedding cake was kept, now eaten out by worms. She's still in her wedding dress, which was now falling apart. Time stood still in her room. The clocks were stopped at the hour when she was supposed to get married. The blinds were drawn. Time stands still in that room. Is that us? Are we on that road? You know, some people come to church expecting that they're not going to find too much change in churches. And they come to church for that reason. They want to keep everything exactly the same. And when they get there, they discover that half the pews are gone. And there's a screen up. Can't handle that. I remember a session decision here in Knox to start to use candles in the church service. You know, a couple left over this decision saying it was Catholic, and they went over to St. Andrews. 2 weeks later, St. Andrews introduced candles. You know, if we can't handle change, then we're doomed to reacting. We're doomed to bitterness, gloom, and increasing sadness. Dick Van Dyke is 98 years old, and he looks fabulous. What's his handle on change and how to adapt? He says, we have to keep moving. Stay positive no matter what. Keep our sense of humor. It's great advice. What's a truly Christian response to everything I've been talking about today? We can ask the powerful question, where is the still point in this universe? Have we forgotten that God is our only security? Everything else changes except the God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is the still point around which all change moves. And if we're anchored in that still point, I believe we can handle anything. Some people think that the way to please God is by following all the rules as closely as possible. Risk for these folks is out of the question. But why has God put all this change around us if we're not going to be able to grow and profit by the change in the depths of our souls? Change is there, I put to you, for a reason. And the reason is to build our souls by discovering resilience, nimbleness, hope in the face of despair, and laughter when things don't work out the way we thought they should. I had a friend who had 2 little squirrels she'd rescued. Their mother had been killed by a car. She kept these squirrels in a large cage. And that was all these squirrels knew of freedom. But as they grew up, the day came when she decided she was going to release them back into the wild. I went with her to release them. We got to the wild area over there, and in the middle of the wood, we opened the cage door. The squirrels were motionless with the door open. That was a very big change for them. Slowly, very slowly and gingerly, they came out of the cage to look around. They took in the bright sunlight and the tall grass. And what was that tall plant that we would call a tree? Suddenly, one of them ran up my leg onto my shoulder and looked around, and then suddenly they both were off and ran straight up a tree. Freedom. Wonderful, exciting freedom. You know, God didn't put us in this world to find our security in the cages that we've built for ourselves. We're not to stay behind the bars of our insecurities and fears. And so God made this world of change, for without change, God knew that we would stagnate and have no reason for living and die. And in the midst of all this change, the great Creator has asked us to place our security in the one who does not change, as a sea anchor from which we can ride out any storm. I want to ask you today some personal questions. Do you know this great God? Do you know the one who said, "Lo, I am with you even to the end of the world"? Why not take his advice? Just go into your room, shut the door, get down on your knees, and ask the great God, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, into your life. When Isaiah the prophet told us that God would come into our world, he had a name for him, Emmanuel, which means God with us. And Emmanuel has come for the express purpose of being with us. We don't have to be alone. If we invite Emmanuel into our hearts at this time of so much uncertainty in the world, then 2024 will be handled from a point of spiritual power previously unknown to us. The Second World War began in September 1939. Britain's prospects for survival looked exceedingly dim. But in December of that year, King George VI made this quote with which we began the service. He pointed for all to see where the true hope lies in the face of very dark negative change. I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light, that I might tread safely into the unknown." And he replied, "Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be better to you than light and safer than a known way." So I went forth, and finding the hand of God, trod gladly into the night. So no matter what challenges you face in 2024, this can be you. One hand to carry what light you need, and the other into the hand of the one who made all things.